Well, at ease, paratroopers, and welcome back to the Enduring Mindset podcast. I'm your host, retired Army Staff Sergeant Kevin Kidder. Today's episode is one I've really been looking forward to. In this conversation, I sit down with Keith Cole, former United States Marine Corps Sergeant during Vietnam, turned CPA and author of Burnout, God's Recovery Plan. Today, we get into something I think a lot of people can deal with, but don't always talk about: burnout. What it actually looks like, why it shows up after everything is supposed to be going well, and why so many of us try to carry it alone. As I've been working through my own book, The Invisible Veteran, which comes out in about 6 weeks, this conversation lines up directly with that. It's the part that people don't see, the part that we don't talk about. So if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right on the outside, but something's off underneath, this is a good one. Here's my conversation with Keith Cole. Let's get into it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest today. We have Keith Cole. Keith, I appreciate you making the time to be here. I've really been looking forward to this conversation. You're the author of Burnout, God's Recovery Plan. And what stood out to me in your message was how you described the hardest battles showing up long after the obvious ones are over, those quiet moments behind desks when people are expected to have it all figured out and together. And I think that's a conversation a lot of people need. But before we get there, we want to learn about you, where you're from, and your story. And as I do with all my guests, I like to start off with a question from a book written by Brett Ledbetter. He's a mental performance coach. The book is called 365 Questions to Get to Know Yourself and Your Team Better. I met Brett last year in April at a conference in Los Angeles during a breakout session called The Art of Asking Better Questions. And he plugged the book as a means to interact with clients, and before, not doing icebreakers, but asking questions that'll get some transparency and vulnerability going on in their life. So I've taken that, I've adapted it to my own for my podcast, and you picked question number 47, which I really like. It says, if you could talk to vulnerability as if it were a person to describe the impact that it's had on your life, what would you say to it?
Well, Kevin, you're right. That's a good question. So, on the back of that book, is there an answer?
There is not, unfortunately.
But first, Kevin, I just want to say it's an honor to be with you, and I appreciate what you're doing, and for veterans, because this is a conversation that matters more than most people realize.
Yes, thank you.
Uh, so, as far as answering number 47, uh, wow. So, when I wrote this book, uh, I really put myself out there.
Yeah.
It's truly put me in a vulnerable position. Um, so I think maybe the first question I would have asked would be uh, vulnerability. Why are you making it so tough on me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that would probably that's my answer. That's what I would say right off the bat.
And I think that's probably the truest answer. I contemplated myself the other day. I was answering some questions for my publisher, and it came to, what was the hardest part about writing the book? And my answer was accepting the fact that I had the authority to write the book. Um,
Wow,
you,
very good.
you're putting yourself out there, and there's a level of responsibility that comes as an author, and um, it's going to land certain ways for certain peoples. And if you're going to be vulnerable and transparent and authentic, you're going to hurt somebody's feelings intentionally or unintentionally. But yeah, the vulnerability that comes with writing a book, it can be very cathartic, but you're exposing yourself to a lot of exposure and people's opinions of you and your experiences, and it may not always be well received. So I commend you, one, for writing your book and sharing it, and I, again, thank you for coming on the show. I think we're gonna have a really good conversation.
That's great. I think we will, Kevin. Thanks.
All right, Keith. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? What was life like before the military?
Well, I grew up in a little town in Ohio, and I, as long as I can remember as a kid, I was going to become a Methodist minister.
Mm,
And in fact, I used to play preacher, and the way I did that was I would stand at the base of the or at the bottom of the stairway that led to our upstairs in our house, and I would preach to the imaginary congregation. And once in a while, I'd have to call somebody out for chatting a little bit too loudly back then. Uh, and so I did that for quite a while. There was no doubt I was going to be a minister. Uh, when I was a senior in high school, my my dad died. He was 52 years old when he died, and he was a railroader.
mm,
And when he died, it the impact on me, my reaction to that was total rebellion. Naturally, I blamed God. Who else? My dad was too strong; it couldn't be his fault. And uh, so, any idea of becoming a minister just flew away from my
mm.
mind. That was it. And I decided after high school that I would, uh, instead of going to college, I'm going to the Marine Corps. And so, in doing that, of course, was the Vietnam War was going on. And so, but being a stupid kid that I was at the time, the uh, it's a war, oh, that's good, more the better. And but I was angry. I was mad at myself. I was hurt. I was sad. I didn't think about anybody else, just myself and the pain that I was going through. Um, and so from that time, I went into the Marine Corps. And uh, after boot camp and after advanced infantry training, I was told, says, you're smarter than these other guys, so you're going to be a machine gunner. if, if I'm smarter, we're in trouble. Uh, but I became a machine gunner, and I went, of course, straight to Vietnam shortly after that.
Okay. What time period and whereabouts in Vietnam were you?
I was I was in that was in 1966 that I enlisted, and I went to Vietnam in October of '66. And the entire time I was there, I was in what was called the Leatherneck Square, which was a 54 square mile area next, right close to the DMZ on the eastern part of the country. And we did we did get off out of the country for a short bit and got on board ships. We made a couple of beach landings. We made the landings by helicopter.
Oh,
We trained by landing using Amtraks and physical
mm.
tractors to make the landing, and then when we did it, we used helicopters.
Let's see. Were you in Iroquois or what type of helicopters?
Ah, big ones.
Big ones.
I don't remember the name of them.
No, no worries. So quite an experience. You're the first Vietnam veteran I've had the privilege of having on the show. Thank you. Um, my best friend's mother she was a nurse in Vietnam. My mother-in-law's got clients who are in Vietnam. Truly one of the forgotten and most mistreated generations of veterans, and I'm really honored for you to share your story with us. I'd like to kind of define the problem clearly for the audience. And with your book, you talk about burnout. And when you say burnout, what is it that people are actually experiencing?
Well, in my case, uh, I from the trauma of it, So when I was in Vietnam, I was uh, wounded on three different occasions,
Mm,
and and then when I after the third time, uh, I was meted back to the states, and I spent several months in Great Lakes Naval Hospital. And after that time, it was time to go back to duty. I went back to INI, which is inspector and instructor, which was inspecting and instructing reserves. And there were a few of us who were active duty that we had a compound, but not a base.
hmm
But our main duty was to notify next of kin when their Marine was killed or wounded in action. And then we served as the honor guard for that Marine's funeral. The, the, that duty was truly honorable duty, but it took its toll.
hmm
There were parts of that which were much more difficult than actually being in actual combat. The and a lot of that has always stayed with me for a very long time. Uh, the type of things that came to me, I was had nightmares from combat. I had nightmares from knocking on parents or a widow's door to tell her that her husband had been killed. The And then the funerals constantly. Uh, so there were a number of nightmares to that process. In addition to that, then I was had sleepless nights. The stress was something that kept me awake at night a lot, and uh, headaches, and started drinking a lot.
hmm
Um, and short temper was one thing. It was for sure. Very irritable. Uh, I was fortunate that my wife stayed with me all these years, which is not always the case, you know.
Yeah.
And uh, so it became it just became a situation where then my work started falling off. I was self-employed. I became a CPA and a self-employed uh, for a large number of years, and um, which was it was okay most of the time, and time was going on because I felt as though that this was a calling for me to do. I was helping people on a regular basis, um, helping people with their taxes, helping them get out of trouble with the Internal Revenue Service. It, uh, and it was always it was a pleasure. I mean, I liked the work, I loved what I was doing, and that happened until it didn't.
Mm.
It didn't fit anymore. Something was wrong. My nights were becoming even more sleepless. Uh, as I got older, I didn't have the same nightmares as much as I did when I was younger. But still, the sleepless nights were taking their toll as well.
I can imagine. I had the privilege of going through the casualty assistance notification officer course while in the army. Luckily, I never had to perform that duty. And I thank you for being transparent and vulnerable with the mental, physical, and physiological effects that war and then that duty took on you. That it took a hold of you, and I think it's been a while since we've had to deal with this. Obviously, with the stuff going on with Iran, it's happening again. But we did have a little spell where notifications weren't happening as frequently. Um, you mentioned the drinking. Drinking is something I talk about in my book. Um, the negative coping mechanisms that we do as military service members. Um, From your experience, why do you think we turn to such negative vices to deal with our problems?
I can say for me that alcohol just kind of numbed the brain.
Hmm.
I think, and probably that's may have it. When, I mean, when I was a kid, I wasn't home long enough to, hardly of age to be able to drink. Even though after my dad died, we always managed to find some beer somewhere. But the uh, when I was in the Marines and through Vietnam, I once in a while might have a beer or something, not much. But at the when I started notifying families,
Hmm.
then it took a major change. So I
Yeah,
spent a lot of time in a bar.
yeah. So afterwards, you became a CPA, and you did that for quite a while. It sounds like you were rather successful. What does burnout look like in someone who still appears successful? Kind of wear the mask, like everything's okay on the inside, but on the inside, everything's not okay.
uh, that's exactly right, Kevin. Just the way you said it, and the way I've always looked at it is, and I had three older brothers that were in Marines, and that's the thing. When I the Marine Corps never had chaplains, so my dream of becoming a minister. So how could I be a Marine? How could I be in the Marine Corps? I'm a chaplain. They don't have chaplains. They use the navies. So the
Mm,
Navy personnel are assigned. And I thought, okay, well, I could be a chaplain in the Navy and get assigned to the Marine Corps, you know, to appease my brothers. But the I lost my place. But
no,
what was
no,
the
not at
question?
all. Just what does burnout look like in someone who
Yeah,
still looks like they have it together? They're
right.
successful.
Okay, so that's it. So by going into Marine Corps, I mean, it's the training, it's the way you're trained. You're trained that you are not just believing you're tough, you just know you're tough,
Hmm.
right? And always looked at it as a United States Marine. I was a member of the greatest fighting force on the face of the earth, and so it was like uh, there aren't many of us, but by golly, we're good.
Yeah.
And so that's the total attitude, and the total picture is toughness. And so there was never a thought in my mind to get help
Mm.
the whole time. Just something I wouldn't think about doing. And when I got into when I got out of the Marines, I got out early because my mother died, and I knew she was sick. She had cancer, and she asked me. I was home on leave, and she asked me if she would die before my younger brother and sister graduated from high school, if I would be their guardian. And of course, I said I would. And then that time actually came. She died, and I left the Marines to be their guardian. I was 23 years old, and I was a guardian for 13-year-old and 11-year-old. So I wasn't much more a kid than myself, and that just added more stress, more stuff of what in the world am I doing type of type of thinking, and that type. But the thing of it was that they're my younger brother and sister, so it was my job to be tough, and there was
Like,
no time to show weakness.
yeah.
And
And
then when I got into business and in my own practice, then all the responsibility was on me. The responsibility is not on was not on the employee. I'm the one. that's got to answer for every tax return that we prepare. Um, and so there was a lot of pressure there. During tax season, it was like a madhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And so many late nights. Uh, Quite often, actually, there would be there would be not overnighters or almost overnighters
Mm-hmm.
many nights, just trying to get everything done on time.
I
It
can
was
only imagine the amount of mounting pressure. Vietnam, and then coming home, you've lost one parent, you lose another. Now you're responsible for your younger siblings. That seems like a lot to carry by yourself. And I completely understand that probably isn't the time to show weakness. You have two impressionable children who've lost their whole world as well. Um, so it's not a typical male bravado thing. This is, I'm now the man of the house and I have to do what's necessary. I think it's a different time um, when men and women did things that just needed to be done without a second thought. How were you able to carry everything alone?
um, just did it. It wasn't because I never reached out for help. Um, I had older siblings I would talk to once in a while about situations, but it's still everything still came down to my decision. Um, and then from even at that time, I tried working in a factory in my hometown, but that didn't pan out too well. That wasn't for me to do. So um, I went to college. I worked every day that I went to college. So I always did both at the same time. And eventually I graduated and became a CPA. Uh, I've had I've had jobs where I'm an employee, but I always had clients um, in addition. So I've always been self-employed the whole time, as well as sometimes I had a job until as I got older, and then I just went strictly with self-employment and everything. It goes down. You can speak with some of the more senior employees, but as far as making decisions what's going to go on, but still it all like Truman said, the buck stops here.
Yeah. Was there a specific point where you knew something had to change? I mean, you're working full time, you're going to school, you become a CPA, you're a guardian. Seems like a lot going on all at one point. Was there a specific point where you're just like, okay, something's got to give, something has to change?
It was late. I was in my office. I was by myself, and um, actually, I had a scotch bottle down in my left-hand desk drawer, which I pulled out, and I started to pour it in a glass, and I just ignored the glass and I just drank from the bottle. I was very hurt, upset, frustrated, or something, and I put the bottle down. Then I started to do it again, and that's when I slammed the bottle down, and I remember just saying something like, "No, I can't do this anymore," and um, and then I prayed out to God, help me, you know, and to and and to forgive me for total ignoring you the whole time and trying to do everything on myself by
Mm,
myself.
that's really powerful. There's nothing like a perceived rock bottom to really make you turn your eyes upward and place your belief and faith in the Lord. Was that when faith became a part of your recovery process, or was there another catalyst?
It, with my faith in God, uh, had wavered up and down multiple times throughout my life. And uh, I was no stranger to faith, as in Semper Fidelis, always faithful. It's a Marine Corps motto.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, it's uh, putting in part of that is, it's God, country, and core. So, but I didn't always keep it in that order by a long shot. The But when I started after college, when I started reading other things, I read a number of positive thinking type books, and so there, a lot of those are faith related
Hmm.
as well. And so I mean, even Norman Vincent Peale, Power of Positive Thinking and
Yeah.
Enthusiasm Make a Difference, and those are the types of books that I read all the time. Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. So I mean, it was those type of the books that uh, helped me keep my toughness. I guess is one thing. Uh,
Oh, I like that. What does when someone fully surrenders, what does that look like? Not conceptually, but in real life, in practicality.
in that particular night, in the process of, uh, it was not like Paul on his way to Damascus, where
Hmm.
gets knocked off the horse and comes blind, and you know and becomes a great apostle after that. But uh, so it wasn't a dramatic change in everything, and it wasn't an instant healing by a long shot, but it was the beginning of a healing process. And I spent quite a long time that particular evening just talking to God after that as well.
Do you recall what the conversation was, or anything specific you asked for?
Pretty much my asking was just peace.
Hmm.
Um, the the life was tough, and on the inside, we were talking about that a little bit earlier as far as uh, being tough on the outside, but in the inside, everything's crumbling.
Hmm.
And it's something I knew. I knew after that particular night, for the first time, I knew I didn't have to pretend.
And when you say you didn't have to pretend, what were you pretending to do or
I,
be?
I did not have to impress anybody. I had no. I did not have to act tough because now I knew I had gained real strength,
Hmm.
probably for the first time in my life.
That's very powerful. And since then, and knowing that you had real strength, what changes have you seen in yourself and in your life, and your ability to connect and help others?
Well, shortly after that, I started writing uh, the book, but it wasn't. It didn't start out to be a book because now it's been a long number of years where I've had sleepless nights and short temper and such irritable insides and turmoil that I wanted to know what happened all these years. Why? How did this all come about? Why? And I want to know why it's all of a sudden exploded in my mind.
Hmm.
And so I wrote. I started writing down what happened, and then As time went on, as I was going through it, I realized that, at least I perceived anyway, that I'm not the only person that goes through trauma. You know, I wasn't the only person ever in combat. I'm not the first one person who ever became a guardian of a younger brother and sister, or been in business, uh, having the difficulties of running a business. And whether you're in a major corporation, a executive, or whatever your job might be, or a shop owner. There's stress and things that go with that, and these things will pile up over time.
Yeah, there's some solace in knowing that you're not the only one. It can feel like you're alone, you're isolated, your circumstances are unique, and they are unique in your own experience. But I have found that connecting with others who are dealing with similar trials or tribulations, um, I think it's called trauma bonding, where people can relate over shared hardships. Um, that you can find solace because someone can relate to what you've gone through, and their different experiences can shed light maybe on something you can do to help yourself, or they can help you. um, you've talked about some of the battles happening in quiet moments. Why are those quiet moments the hardest?
I think that when you're really operating in something, you're really focused in on, uh, in my case, doing tax returns. As long as I'm focused in there, I'm busy. Uh, I have, your mind can only think of one thought at a time.
Hmm.
And so, uh, if you're staying focused right in on something like that, these other thoughts aren't going to come. But when you put that aside and you just sit back and try to relax for a moment, and you're quiet, and you're not thinking much of anything, or you or your mind goes off to thinking about whatever went wrong, or what's going wrong, or what might go wrong. Um, and then they can be some severe attacks on the mind, very right from that.
Yeah, I experienced that quite a bit. I talk about in the book that the silence was deafening. I'd gone through a divorce. My kids were with their mom, week on, week off, and my house, it would so quiet, it would just overwhelm me.
Wow.
And that's where I chose negative coping mechanisms. Um, and you mentioned at one point you just had to be tough. Um, why do you think people avoid asking for help even when they know they need it?
I think for me, there was I was a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. That thought will never leave my mind.
Hmm.
And uh, why why would I need anybody else's help? I think basically is was where I was. I'm not going to I'm not going to put myself out there and show my weakness.
Right. Having gone through what you've gone through and come out on the other side, what would you tell someone that is in that position now where they know they need help, but they were in the armed forces and they're supposed to be tough and impenetrable, but they're hurting? What would you say to them now, knowing what you know?
Well, the very first thing is don't go it alone.
Hmm.
Is what I would say right off the bat. But the other thing is by talking over what you're going through with somebody who you trust, whether it's a friend, a professional, clergy, a support group, whatever the case, that is not weakness. That takes strength.
I'm so glad you said that. And ladies and gentlemen, this man who was in Vietnam. He was an NCO in the Marines. I love the Marines. I fought with the Marines. I have a very special place for Marines, and they are some of the toughest human beings. And you have one saying, asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. But he also cautions you on who you're asking. Make sure the person or people you seek out are fountains, not drains that they can pour into you. They're not going to take away from you. Um, I love that you talked about writing almost as a cathartic exercise. One of my previous guests, Ryan Pote, he was a naval aviator. He was in a bad crash. His wings were taken away, and he's now a published author, one of my favorite authors. And his books and characters are actually derived from him writing about his experiences, his emotions, his nightmares. That was something that proved healing for him. What was something that, what do you think gives someone permission to stop carrying everything alone and say, I need help? What's kind of that release? What gives someone that permission?
Uh, well, they that came to me when I surrendered to God,
Mm,
and it's like, uh, well, you know very well, being a veteran yourself, that um, it's you don't like, you don't want, you won't say you're broken.
hmm.
But that particular night in my office, I truly broke, and then I surrendered. And the surrender is not the same as surrender. I'm not surrendering to an enemy. I'm surrendering to God, which is a friend and a guide through this life that we're in.
Yeah, I don't know if I've shared this story yet. The way everything's kind of shaped up to where I am now. Last summer, for the third summer in a row, I was unemployed by choice, and I sat at my kitchen table and cried. Prayed for a solid 15 minutes. I had tears streaming down my face, snot bubbles. It was very, very unattractive. But I asked for a clear, Kevin proof sign that the Lord would tell me and show me what He wanted me to do with my life. And less than an hour later, my life coach and pastor called, and we had a conversation. And um, it's led me to where I am now, which is everything I've hoped for and dreamed for, and it's God's vision, it's God's plan, it's His timing, and it's given me an unwavering amount of faith and confidence that whatever happens, if it's what I want, what I don't want, if it's a lot less of me and more of Him, and seeing His hand and stuff, and that's been hugely um, comforting. Just knowing that, like you said, I surrendered. Like I'm not trying to plan everything and do everything myself. It's asking for help and surrendering that what does happen is what the Lord has intended for me.
Wow, that's a wonderful testimony. That's great.
Yeah, thank you. What would you say to someone right now um, that they need to stop doing immediately? If they're stuck, if they're burnout, if they're in the patterns you and I have talked about, you know, stop doing this.
Uh, well, I would take a look at the habits. If there's bad habits, I'd definitely say stop
Mhm.
those. If you're, using alcohol or drugs or something to take the pain away, uh, that certainly is a waste of time because it's going to add pain.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a very big one for sure.
I think that's the main things not to do.
There's other things people do too. Sex. Some people throw themselves into sexual desires, whether it's pornography or inappropriate relationships, things of that nature. It's not always just drugs and alcohol, though. Those are common. Um, have you found a habit or a mindset that can create momentum early? That if you're able to create a habit or find a mindset that once you're on that road, things tend to get just a little bit easier and you can gain momentum in that forward thinking.
Well, I wrote about God's recovery plan,
Mm.
And that, I believe, exactly that's the roadmap. Um, should I tell you about that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So it the thing of it is by being in the military, you have a tremendous structure, and so it's going to be boom, 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 boom. It's going to be like this. This is where you're headed, and I tried to do that when I first got out of the Marine Corps. Um, it didn't work all that well, uh, and then when I, when I got into business, I did have a structure. I did set it up because that was very important when I'm dealing with other people's income taxes to have that structure. And but uh, as things went on, it kind of it drifted a little, and the structure was uh, it was a man-made type of structure of
Hmm.
things. These are the steps that we have to do every time the new client comes in the door, type of thing. With God's recovery plan, I set up it's called a praiser. So it's an acronym where the A stands for action, and you start the day with intentional movement, not drifting. So in the military, we had never moved without purpose.
Hmm.
And so recovery is the same way. Uh, P is next, and that's for prayer. And this is where surrender happens. It's not a weakness, it's alignment. And you're not carrying a mission alone anymore. And uh, not that you carried missions alone in the Army or the Marine Corps or any other branch of service, but after that, and you get into your life, and you can feel like you're very much alone in your responsibility. But that doesn't have to be the fact. And so the next is R, which is reading scripture. And this becomes your new field manual. So now you're replacing the old voices in your head with true and actual holds under pressure.
Okay.
And then A is for affirmations. And this is about retaining the internal dialogue. Most veterans are still running old commands in their mind,
Hmm.
and this rewrites them. The affirmations are uh, get you helps you with your language, uh, and to change it to where you're talking positive and not negative. And then inscribing, one of my favorites. I have a gratitude journal that I write in every morning when I get up, and that's what the inscribing is. You start recording what you're thankful for,
Mm.
and that changes your awareness and it changes your mindset. And then the S is for seeing, which is visualization. So you start to see what God has planned for you. And E is for exercise. The body carries stress and trauma, and the movement is a part of that healing. And it's not optional. You have to exercise. And R then is for rest. This is the hardest one for most of us, anyway. But recovery doesn't happen in constant motion, it happens when you allow restoration.
Mm. Well, there's so many good takeaways. I love that acronym. You talked about affirmations. I think Tony Robbins is probably the most recent famous person to quote it, but it's impossible to be grateful and anxious at the same time. The mind can't comprehend both at the same time. So if you're going to choose one, choose to be grateful, be thankful. It's a great way to combat anxiety. I love that you talk about writing things down. Um, we've talked about the catharsis of you and I have dealt as we written stuff down that Ryan Pote did. Several of my guests have talked about how just healing and um, an emotional release it is to put your thoughts and emotions to pen and paper or keyboard to laptop, whatever it may be. And I love that you talk about the intentionality, starting the day off intentional. When you leave the military, obviously you have PT in the morning, and then you've got work, you've got all these things structured. When you lose that structure, it's kind of on you. You have the onus to create that structure, and if you start it intentionally, it's a great way to get your day going.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that.
If someone is listening right now and they're stuck in that cycle, um, they don't want to ask for help or they're carrying more than they should, where can they start? What's one thing they can start to do right now to move forward and begin that healing process?
My healing process began by talking to God, and through my faith in God, then I was able to reach out to other people, able to talk more about what was on, what was bothering me, what the issues were, what my trauma was, what my sleepless nights were.
What would you say to the person that isn't religious, that hasn't built that relationship with God and is hesitant to do so? Maybe they had a bad experience growing up, they weren't exposed to it, or they just flat out don't believe.
The I have a website, and I think that would be a place to start, and you can reach me through that. I'd, I'd be more than happy to listen to anybody.
Would you mind sharing what your website is? How can people find you?
It's recoverybyfaith.com.
Awesome. Recoverybyfaith.com. And we haven't really talked about it. How did the book come about? How did you, was it, a couple week, month, year, decade project?
Yep, that's good. The Like I said earlier, I started writing to myself, and then when I realized that maybe this would help others as well, because I'm not the only one in this situation. And so I just I took my memories, my pain, and my redemption, and I poured it into a fictional Marine who I called Kevin Casey. And whereas all the names are fictitious names throughout the book, but the story's not. The story is my memories and my pain and my redemption. And it took me a year. It took me a year to write it.
And when you wrote that, were you still a young man? Had you grown up a little bit?
I was very old.
So this is a newer work for you.
Yes, yes. This is uh, about almost a year and a half.
Okay. And where can readers find it? Are you on Amazon or Barnes and
Yeah,
Noble?
I am. I am on Amazon, uh, but also you can go right straight to my website and get a link to it. And the um, if you just go on the website and you have a link and you have some different options of where you can get the book from. Also, I have a workbook, and the workbook is the appraiser.
And what does the workbook do? What does it provide for the user?
It it is the appraiser, so it's got 12 weeks of that program. So each week each one of those items in the praiser, the uh, action, prayer, reading, uh, each one is listed with a Bible verse. So every one of those steps is grounded in Scripture, and then each week those verses change.
Mm.
And so at the end of each week, there's there's a space for each one of the steps or each one of the items where you can write. There's a place where you can reflect and put notes as well.
That's fantastic. As we come to the end of the discussion, which has just been fantastic, um, you've experienced a lot of loss, and at some point, we all leave this earth. And I wonder, what do you want your legacy to be?
I will. I would be very pleased if I could be known as someone who has helped people.
I'm a big baseball fan, and I ask this question all the time. We're batting 1,000. Nobody has come on here and said, "I want to be known for being famous or having a buttload of money or having a ton of cars." Every single person has talked about leaving a positive impact in the lives of others, and I no doubt you're going to say the same thing. And you said it your own way, Keith. It's been phenomenal. If people remember one thing from our conversation today, what would you want it to be?
Don't go it alone.
I
Seek
love it.
seek assistance.
Don't go. It's very John Wayne, very old school, but in a a very mentally healthy manner. You don't have to go it alone, guys. We're examples of people who have struggled and overcome them and are seeking to help others. I think we're in one of the healthiest seasons for veterans that I've seen in my lifetime, where it's not, oh, it sucked for me, so it has to suck for you. A lot of people, yourself included, are saying, "Hey, man, um, I went through this. I'm happy to be um, a lighthouse in your storm, to be a map on your journey as you navigate this season." Um, I thank you for your work. I can't wait to read the book. Um, we've got your website, we've got the book, and just a tremendous amount of insight. Is there anything that I haven't asked or that you'd like to share that we didn't cover?
Uh, I don't think so. I think we've covered an awful lot of material. Um, but like I said, I didn't say, but I am from a family of Marines. I have
Mm-hmm.
three older brothers, right? And so I have my second oldest brother, youngest son, was a Marine, and he was in the Marine Corps for 10 years, and he was diagnosed with diabetes, so he had to get out. But he has six children. So his dad, my brother, and his father-in-law were both Marines, and the father-in-law was in Vietnam. He's a couple years younger than me, but he was in Vietnam uh, as well. And so my nephew has four sons who are active duty Marines right now.
Wow.
He has two daughters who are active duty Army right now. So he has six children, a father, a father-in-law himself, and three uncles, including his favorite one, who uh, all Marines, and the two Army girls, ladies.
Just what a tremendous amount of service. And thank you all to your family for your selflessness, for standing up for your country, for standing in the gap, saying, "Here I am, Lord, send me." Thank you so much for your time, Keith, for taking out of your busy schedule to share with us. It's been a true honor.
Certainly an honor for me, Kevin, and thank you so very much.
Wow. Big thank you to Keith here for coming on, being so transparent and vulnerable and honest. And for just having a great conversation. There's a lot in there, but what stood out to me is this: Keith showed up. He showed up in combat. He showed up when there was loss in his personal life. He became the guardian for his younger siblings at 23. He built a business and he didn't make excuses. He handled what was right in front of him. And a lot of you listening probably sounds pretty familiar. You've done the same thing. You've carried responsibility, you've taken care of people, and you've pushed through when you had to. But here's where the shift happens from just handling business to something more detrimental. At some point, continuing to carry everything alone doesn't make you stronger. It starts to wear you down. And that's where burnout lives. So, yeah, show up, take ownership, be accountable, but don't confuse that with doing everything by yourself forever. If you connected with something in this episode, I would like you to take the next step and check out my book, The Invisible Veteran. It's built around some of the same challenges we talked about today and how to rebuild when the mission changes. The book comes out in about 6 weeks, May 26th. You can pre order it now. It's available on my publisher's website, ballastbooks.com. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and Walmart. And hey, if you do pre order it, let me know. Shoot us a DM, something. We're doing something special for early supporters. Now, more importantly, if the episode resonated with you, please understand that you're not alone. Transition is hard, identity shifts are hard, healing is hard. None of that has to be done in isolation. Reach out, have that tough conversation, initiate the conversation you've been avoiding, take the first step. And when you do, make sure you're talking to someone who's a fountain, not a drain. Someone who pours into you, not someone who only takes from you. Be the leader in your own life. If this episode helped you, consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave us a review, send it to another veteran or leader who might need to hear the message. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, X, YouTube, Amazon Music at enduring_mindset_enterprise. And check out the website, www.enduringmindsetenterprise.com. Learn more about the book, the business, and our nonprofit arm, the Enduring Mindset Foundation. This has been the Enduring Mindset Podcast, reminding you that your past may shape you, but it does not have to define you. Until next time, onward, forward, fall out.